Throughout the encounter, the officers attempted several non-lethal techniques to gain compliance and control of Mr. Sterling's hands. Their efforts to do so were a direct result of the information relayed to them by the Baton Rouge Police Department dispatcher. And that was that Mr. Sterling was armed with a firearm. Therefore, their attempt to gain control of Mr. Sterling's hands were well-founded and reasonable under the circumstances and under Louisiana law. Furthermore, the officers concerned that he was armed and dangerous was in fact subsequently verified and correct. The seminal question presented is whether Officers Howie Lake and Blaine Salamone can be held criminally responsible for the death of Aloton Sterling under applicable laws of the state of Louisiana. Our job was not to determine whether the Baton Rouge Police Department's policy was followed or if certain tactics or language was more appropriate than others. After a thorough and exhaustive review of the evidence, the facts that can be established beyond a reasonable doubt, the law and jurisprudence of the state of Louisiana, and the obligations of prosecutors under the Code of Professional Conduct, the Louisiana Department of Justice cannot proceed with a prosecution of either Officer Lake or Officer Salamone. This decision was not taken lightly. We came to this conclusion after countless hours of reviewing the evidence gathered.
All right.
Turned over to us.
And that is the conclusion there. Cedric and Joey. Cedric, what do you think as you hear this? No charges. You hear Landry there saying that there were several times they tried to use non-lethal actions to get a hold of his hands, and that they had reason to believe he was armed because the dispatcher had told them that, and he said this was well-founded and reasonable. Their actions were under the circumstances and under law. What did you think?
Well, Breonna, to be quite frank with you, I'm not surprised of the outcome of this investigation. As you just heard the state AG clearly articulate, all the evidence suggests that this was not some careless shooting or some vicious shooting. It's so unfortunate for everyone involved. But here again, I will go back to what I'd stated to you earlier, is that when cases such as this, as the whole world watched, and it became very sensitive to the entire community in light of where the policing community is in Baton Rouge and in still many cities across this country, it certainly created a great deal of pause. Going forward, one thing is going to happen. That city mayor and that chief, who I'm both acquainted with, who are both very capable and competent, will hopefully move that community towards healing, because this is a time when we now have to begin to bridge these relationships, and hopefully over the last couple of years they've been doing so, so that resolve can come to this and this community can heal and everyone can somehow find a way to move on with their lives.
Joey, some people are not going to be ready to do that. They look at that video and they see a man who is pinned down. You hear there Landry saying his hands were not secured. He had a weapon. Yes, there did turn out to be a weapon. But a lot of folks look at that video and they say, no, this doesn't match what I am seeing here.
And therein lies the problem. And look, people, of course, are going to go and they're going to peacefully protest, and they have the absolute right to do that. And why are they doing that? Because you see repeatedly where police engaging in behavior like this are cleared. And it speaks to a number of issues. Number one, I understand that the Attorney General is opining about what he believes the evidence shows. That's a jury question. In the event you want to ensure police accountability, start holding police accountable. There are members of a jury who you could assess whether or not the conduct was reckless in any way, whether or not the conduct was otherwise negligent in any way, but not to bring forth charges at all and just clear them furthers the narrative and furthers the divide that, you know, are police respecting communities, or are they escalating matters? And in speaking about that, what about investigations of the police? Should they be done, you know, by officials, or should they be done by perhaps outside sources where the public can truly respect and understand what they say? And so I don't think that the public is going to be at all pleased with this in any way, shape, or form. It's something, in my view, that's not surprising but entirely disappointing. And I think members of that community should have heard, evaluated the evidence, and they should have been the one deciding whether or not this was criminal, not a unilateral determination made by a state official who's too closely connected, in my view, to the matter.
Breanna, if I can jump.
Go on, Cedric.
Breanna, if I can jump in here for a minute. In many ways, I agree with my friend Joy there, but in some ways, I do have to differ. And I differ from the perspective is this. This is their process there in the state of Louisiana. And if that's their process, then the process maybe needs to be changed. But what we have in front of us now is a determination, a due process that has been concluded. No, there are absolutely not going to be people in that community happy. But what has to happen, if they're not satisfied with the process, then how do we change that process? Because here again, as I said at the top of this show, is that 2 years is too long. It creates too much suspicion anytime an investigation takes that long. And when the conclusion is not what a community assess or it appears that what it should be, it certainly does create continued anger and fear with people. But what I would say to that community, as I've said to many communities across this country, is that now is the time. If you want to, if people want to march and they want to protest, it has to be certainly in a peaceful and civil manner so that your community and the rest of the country can hear you. But at the same time, that community is going to have, and its leadership is going to have to find a way to build and continue to build those bridges so that if something, again, similar to this even happens ever again, they're in a much better place than they were today.
Agreed, but briefly, how do you build those gaps and how do you build the divide when you continually see investigators and state officials reach similar
and gentlemen,
conclusions?
I'm so sorry. I have been out of time for a moment. Here, Joey Jackson, Cedric Alexander, thank you so much joining us on this breaking news. The Louisiana Attorney General saying that they're declining to press charges against the officer who killed African-American man Cedric Alexander in 2016. We will continue to follow this breaking news.